Good morning, Pastor Jennifer McCurry. Thank you for joining me here. I think second episode of the Convos of the year. Sorry for the audience for not having more episodes this year. So I got into sickness for several times, and I did have some trips that I have to make. Apologize for that, but now I'm happy to have Pastor Jennifer here, and I met her a long time ago, several years ago, before COVID, at the Homeless Education Committee, something like that.
It's Communication and Education Committee.
There you go.
Of
right.
The Homeless Advisory Board.
There you go.
Yes.
Advisory Board. Right. So I think we met at the Allies Health Wellbeing, and it was under Steve DeYoung. And we also met with Peter Harvey from Allegheny, DHS. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and actually when I saw her and I met you, I remember that I had actually met you before, and it was down here in Market Square that you did some interviews, and that actually was an inspiration for Storybird to also do interviews. Like, it was great that to know your neighborhood, to know your communities of who they are. So I'm just wondering, so you can tell me about the interviews that you did in Market Square. What's that about?
Yeah. We had a grant from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which is the church in which I'm ordained. And we had proposed a way of honoring the 500th anniversary of the Reformation that was kicked off by Martin Luther, and wanted to honor that in a way that was much broader than just our Lutheran church. And so we had, from my congregation, which at the time was First Lutheran Church downtown, we were working with our ministry partners in other congregations in our area, and conducting interviews in the community, asking them what change had looked like in their lives. And I don't remember exactly what our prompt for them was, but reflecting on how they had experienced change and what was life-giving about that. And we talked to people on the street, we talked to people in the jail, we were kind of all over, and had a photographer who was working with us. And it was really powerful to hear people's testimonies, apart from any religious context, really, about, how I would say God had worked in their lives to bring transformation and growth and goodness at times when they may not have expected it. So we collected those interviews and then ended up, with our grant money, creating some banners that a variety of businesses and organizations downtown hung. And so there was in the fall of 2017, right around the actual anniversary, we had this lovely kind of community visible witness about how God has been working in our community life together, and ended with an ecumenical worship service that gave thanks for that. It was a total joy to do.
And so you mentioned that work. You did that work while you were at the First Lutheran Church.
Yeah. I did, yes.
Are you also affiliated with another church in Swissvale?
No.
Okay.
So my membership is still at First Lutheran Church, and so my family continues to attend, even though I'm no longer a called pastor there.
Okay. So where are you still a pastor somewhere? Do you have I don't know. I don't want to say like a mortar and brick church, but
yeah. My call currently is at Carnegie Mellon University, where I'm the program director of religious and spiritual life. And so my bishop has named that as my ministry at this time. I do what we call supply or substitute for pastors in both Lutheran and Episcopal churches where they may be ill or on vacation. And that's a joy. So it means I get to kind of go all over the place. But my actual home congregation continues to be First Lutheran Church in downtown.
Okay. So, and what are the challenges being an interfaith person in the university setting? Because even when I was a college student, that was like decades ago, it was quite hard. I mean, I don't want to say hard or easy, but every week we had tables for students to advertise their groups, right? And there were always like a corner of several tables full of people trying to invite people to go to the church, like all this either Bible study or and I don't want to be like being stereotypical, whatever, stereotyping people, right? But there are a certain kind of demographic, right? And then like one corner is like all the frats and the sororities, and the other end of the spectrum is all the Bible study and churches, right? So do you guys still have that in CMU or in other colleges right now?
Yeah, at least at CMU in the fall, we have a big event when all the student organizations and some of our affiliated religious organizations have tables, and there are something like 300 plus recognized student organizations at CMU. So there's a great diversity of very different ways that students can engage with others and be involved in activities that they find renewing, which, I mean, is the spectrum. It's like physical activity and creative activity and leadership opportunities and religious activities and everything in between. I probably don't know them all. So there is still that, but part of my role on campus is to just help make sure that students know that it's an option to engage with their religious and spiritual life in some way. And that includes from a more secular perspective. We have a student organization that's called the Humanist League. And so that is generally folks who are agnostic or atheist and want to have community as they reflect ethically about what it means to be a human in the world. I mean, for students who are, some of them come in deeply committed to a particular tradition and grateful for at least parts of that, and others that don't come necessarily being clear about what they believe or what's important to them as they practice. But it's just such a wonderful time in life to consider, who I am and what sustains me and what I believe about the world around me, and to learn about others. And that's a big part of my role on campus, is to help nurture these spaces and relationships where people can learn how to be with others, to respectfully ask questions and learn about what folks' values and commitments are, and to do so in a way that is connective and respectful and engaging and moves toward collaboration and growth together instead of division and anxiety and fear. And I mean, especially when it comes to our next generation of leaders, right? We need people here who are prepared to really reach across the aisles of our lives and to be able to seek a vision of our life together and to lead toward that in a way that is honoring how we are as full people. It's really a joy to be able to help give students more experiences like that to prepare them.
You mentioned something that it was going to be my follow-up questions, but you already addressed that you also invite, or you also welcome the agnostics people, the secular people who actually probably atheists as well, right? You try to include everyone, that everyone has a space or freedom to express what they believe.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. And so do you have any probably recent examples of how you did that? How you make this collaborative work happen, because I think it's great, because we have to teach them while they're young to do collaborative work, like this nonprofit people, they don't work together. I mean, well, everybody, again, everybody, all human, even for profit, right? They always compete, right? Yeah, everybody compete, me in this space in a nonprofit or even in journalism, we compete, right? So, so it's sad, but it's great that you teach them young of how to collaborate in this space, right? Probably at work or in the study, you have this groups work, right? Group project, group paper, but then in the real life, which everything is a lot of nuance are at place, and a lot of understanding that's not mentioned that you have to understand, right? So can you provide me some examples?
Yeah. So this past fall in 2024, we formed on campus a spiritual life student advisory team. And the sort of template of a student advisory team is something that multiple offices on our campus form in order to give students the space to give feedback and contribute to how our staff offices are engaging on campus. But for the spiritual life student advisory team, I think this could easily turn into something else that's less about just mere feedback, but actually more constructive leadership that's helping to shape how our relationships are unfolding on campus. So I reached out to all the student organizations that are registered that have some central identity of that relates to meaning making or religion or spirituality, because there's really quite a spectrum. And I was grateful that our leaders from our Humanist League were very open to being a part of it. It began really with just getting feedback and developing relationships, but by the end of this academic year, they were thinking more constructively about what they would like to see happen in the fall. And I'm not entirely sure if those ideas will end up coming to fruition, but for example, one student leader, an undergraduate, had suggested setting up a system so that students could sign up to be matched with someone to have coffee or tea, and have it be someone who comes from a very different worldview, religious and possibly otherwise, as the chance to have a much more personal interaction, and we would need to offer some resources for how to do that, so that they weren't like diving in and feeling totally overwhelmed with how to manage that. But I mean, that's totally different than offering programs, like that's so much more personal. We do also, any programs that come out of my office are always geared for interfaith engagement. So earlier this year, I had planned a workshop on making decisions and how to use some spiritual tools in that process, which many traditions would talk about discernment. It is hard to make some of the big decisions that we have to make, and students have to manage this all the time. But with the goal of like drawing from several different kinds of traditions, that then opens up the chance to learn, regardless of what our actual values are, the sort of approach and the posture, the template. There's still things that we can learn from some of the ancient traditions about how to be thoughtful with what my calling is, how I'm supposed to share my gifts in the world, and what would actually be good and healthy for me. So that's just one example of the goal of making space for anyone from a variety of different commitments, which can include people who are still sorting through who they are and what they believe.
Right. And also some of these groups, on my recent trip, I met with my college friend, and he was he has a son who's attending college right now, I think sophomore, and then he's complaining about his son busy finding girlfriend. and then so the family is not religious at all, but then his son decides to join a Bible study to find a girlfriend. It's like, hey, you should be grateful rather than joining some other group. All right. And I remember that, yeah, I mean, it serves so many purposes that it's just part of a college life.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know why I bring it up. It just like, it comes to my mind that, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's it has many purpose, and I think parents also and students should be grateful for having this 300 organization that they can choose and pick of how they want to engage themselves and how they want to learn the world through these organizations. And you as the program director for this Interfaith, how do you manage the differences? For example, the differences between groups. Sometimes some groups, they do have some inherent differences that are probably, millennial ago, right? They already have these differences. And,
Sure.
And sometimes at some certain points in time of the year, they may get more sensitive than the other. Then how do you do that? How do you bridge that? How do you make sure that the friction does not clash?
Yeah. I mean, I think that part of what's important there is being clear about the frame in which we meet together, that we're not coming together because we have to agree on all the things, because we absolutely won't, right?
Yeah.
But instead, that we can do so in a way that honors that we have some real differences in beliefs and practices, and even like implications for how we think about how we relate to others, how we might vote in elections. But if we can start from a place of acknowledging that there's space between us, I think that then helps to say, like, I want to hear more about what's important to you. Or we've had a couple of events where particular student organizations have decided to talk together about a shared practice, or a practice that seems very similar, like Jewish Shabbat and Christian Sabbath practices, or our Catholic and Muslim student groups met and were exploring the virtues of humility and mercy, and how those show up in their faith traditions and what they mean to them. And that then shifts the focus, right? Like it names or helps acknowledge what is an area that is really similar, and makes space to feel connected in amid difference, while not even trying to like brush over the differences. So I think the context really makes the difference, and we're really careful on campus. Generally, we don't try to say prayers amid a diverse audience. I mean, if it were only Christians gathered, that might be fine, or only Muslims, they certainly prayed together all the time, or only Jewish students. It's when we get into those interfaith contexts, it seems like it's way too complicated in a way that we would fail to honor something really important. But for other things like conversation and reflection or service projects together, those are things that we can come together for, and don't require us to be in agreement with how we look at God or ourselves or the world.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that has been missing, I think I see in this world, or in this, I don't know, for the past few years, that it's okay to disagree, right? People always like, they will pound on you until you agree. But I think for every discussion, we have to agree, probably sign on the dotted line that, we are going to agree to disagree. I mean, we just set that as a goal. We are going to agree to disagree, and then we can have a discussion. Because sometimes people are so, I don't know, people always say so passionate, right? And so extreme, right? So they want to, only me is right? You are wrong, right? No, right? Even like science is the closest approximation based on a particular angle, right? That's it, right? It could change. Doesn't mean that the science changes. It's just the approximation is changing, right? So, and everybody disagree. Everybody's like, I don't know, right? But I'm glad that that your office, that your role is also, to have this space, to allow this space for people to agree to disagree. It's a good foundation before they embark in the real world. Right.
Well, and sometimes we do have to agree on things, right? We do have to have some agreement about, policies and procedures and how we are together. And those are things that, we can hear the particularities of our commitments and then think about what it means to be together amid the variety of commitments and what it means to listen to everyone's needs and make sure that we're providing what needs to be.
Yeah, I think when we start from what we agree on, I think that's very, very important, and then build it from there, right? Rather than from disagreement and going, inside is kind of harder because people tend to be defensive right away.
It's hard not to be, right?
Yeah. Then you mentioned about the similarities earlier, and I remember. I was born in Indonesia, and I grew up and I lived in Indonesia for 25 years before I moved here. And I remember there was a speech or discussion by one of the former president of Indonesia, and he was educated in Germany. And people were asking, journalists was asking him about how he could survive in a Western country by being Muslim, and it was like ages ago, right? So probably there are not many Asian markets, there are not many international market, right, to buy, and the president, who's Muslim, and he's like, it's so easy. I just frequent a Jewish market. I just go to a Jewish restaurant if I want to eat halal.
Yeah.
Because it's kosher, it's the same. And people were like, you actually go into I think at that time he was already a politician. Like I couldn't find anything to eat in Washington, D.C. There's no Indonesian restaurant then. And I have to eat halal. And so where do I go? I went to a Jewish restaurant.
Yeah.
As and I don't know whether he was a president then, but he was already a top ranked officials. It's the same, right? That it adheres to certain rules, and so people are like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right?
It's a lovely witness.
Right? Yeah, especially from the top rank officials, and saying that Indonesia has like I don't know, at that time it's like a 200 million populations, and people are like, wow. Right. So, we wish that everybody can point it out that there's similarities. So why argue? Let's find something that we can agree on and build from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I saw in one of your posts that in the past Ramadan, right? Actually, the organization had either prayer or iftar or something.
It's our Muslim Student Association that has a series of iftars, which are the ritual meal that mark the end of the fasting for the day. Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset during the sacred month of Ramadan. So the Muslim Student Association plans a series of iftars that are just for their organization. And then each year they also have a much larger community iftar that is meant to be interfaith friendly. So everyone in the CMU community is welcome to sign up. People bring their families. It's a lovely opportunity for them to share what is important to them and One of the local imams came as an honored guest and gave a little presentation about Ramadan and Eid, which is the holiday that ends the breaking of the fast. And he spoke about his experience in living in other countries and what those practices look like. It was just a lovely time together.
Was it open for public or just students?
That is a great question. I believe that it was, they would not deny anyone's entrance, but it was not...
Not to invite the general population. So.
Right. It was not like for the world necessarily.
Yeah.
Partly because it is paid for by the Muslim Student Association.
Right. So. I remember that I attended for several years because we had family friends who practice fasting during the Ramadan, and they had this tent to open their fast underneath the Cathedral of Learning. So we went there for a couple of years or 3 years. And then I remember I probably was cut. It was because of COVID. Probably it was it. Right.
Sure.
And then after that, then I didn't, just never.
I do know that the Turkish Center does a whole series of interfaith focused iftars each year. This year they partnered with several different organizations, so they were kind of scattered around the greater Pittsburgh area. But I had taken students in my previous call to one of the community iftars that they offered. And it was much smaller and had a very different kind of relational networking that happened, but it was really lovely.
Yeah. So, it's a good way for you to try different cuisines without spending any money.
Well, there's that too. Yes.
All right. So it's great. So let's go back to, how did this start? How did you decide to become a pastor?
Yeah. That is a great question. I discerned a call earlier in life, so it's been a while. When I was I was raised in the Lutheran church, so that was just a part of our family life, that attending church and going to Sunday school and being a part of the church's service to the community were just kind of expected. So faith was a naturally growing process for me. And when I went to college, I was really clear about some of the subjects that I was interested in. And as time passed, I was aware that ministry was one direction that I could go. When I was, for several years, I was a double major with psychology and chemistry. And with psychology, it made sense that was one way that I could share that in the world. I ended up completing my chemistry minor and just leaving it at that, which actually let me take some electives because otherwise I was going to have none, and that was kind of a bummer. So
okay.
I was, after I made that choice with my chemistry minor, that then likely shifted one of my possible career trajectories to like a side table of maybe not that, but we'll see if it sort of pops up again. But a really formative experience for me happened when I was at the end of my junior year of college. I had been back in my home community and doing an internship and working a couple jobs on the side, and was in a serious car accident. And it was not in a place where, it was a poorly designed traffic location, but it was not like I was on a big highway or anything. But I made a turn and missed the fact that there was a very large truck coming toward me. And so I experienced severe traumatic brain injury. I was life flighted to the nearest trauma hospital. I have forgotten the term, but for the reason it counts as severe traumatic brain injury is that I was conscious, but not really, my brain was not working as it should have been for about 10 days, which is an exceptionally long time. And that's why, and so after that, my neurons reconnected. I sort of came back to myself, which was good. But with any kind of brain injury, there's just a lot of recovery that needs to happen. And I had some physical injuries, but not a lot. So I had some physical therapy and occupational therapy. And it was going to be my senior year of college. And my doctors basically said, we have no idea what your brain, if it's ready, but you're welcome to try. And so, I took a reduced course load, but I slept a lot because oxygen is healing for the injured brain. And I just had to slow down my life. So I had been engaged on campus with a whole bunch of different extracurricular things, and I needed to really focus down and be clear about what my primary commitments were and what had to sort of be treated as, bonus, right? If I'm not too tired and I can manage, then okay, I'll go. But if not, I just need to take care of myself. So the result of that time, spiritually, I was incredibly grateful to be alive because I could easily have died. Mm-hmm. And I was also incredibly grateful that my injuries were not greater. When I was in a rehab hospital for about a week, my roommate was several years older than me, as in maybe 4 years older than me. And her injury was not categorized as severe as mine. However, she had more lingering problems already, even at that point. And part of that is because I was 20 and our brains are still developing at that point, which means that an injury can result in much faster recovery and more complete recovery. And so if I had been 24, like my roommate, I could easily have many greater problems. Mm-hmm. So I just felt so grateful to be alive and to be able to go back to college and still kind of be myself, right? Be thinking about what I was going to be doing at the same time as my classmates. But I had to slow down so much. It really nurtured a space of prayer in a way that I had never moved slowly enough to do. I was just so busy and delighting in my world that I needed external reasons to slow down and to live my faith in a slightly different way. So that time of prayer and deep gratitude, and I would say even a sense of reliance on God to just manage life, really opened up a space of discernment. And then as in my senior year progressed, the prospect of going to seminary seemed like a much wiser choice, given the kind of central place that my faith, I think, had always been in, but I hadn't necessarily realized that. Mm-hmm. All that being said, after college, I was a little tired of being in classrooms, and I leaned toward experiential learning. It's part of why I was a chemistry minor, is because the lab is a really awesome place to do experiential learning. Though psychology majors, right? You can be a psychology major and you're doing experiential learning all the time as you observe and engage with people. So I really needed to go out and work and do things. So I worked for 5 years doing ministry things in ways that were accessible and also made space for thinking about what do I want to do for graduate school? Is seminary indeed the path I want to take? And so I was, I know some people are clear about their calls and go straight through whether it's seminary or other forms of grad school. And I needed to take a little bit more time, but it seems like it worked out fine.
Yeah. it's more real. It's not like when you mentioned about the accident, about how long it took you to to have to stay in the hospital. In the back of my mind, I was like expecting, okay, there's going to be an epiphany. There's going to be there's going to be a appearance,
a voice,
godly
right?
appearance.
It's awesome that some people have that experience, but I did not. So
I was already like, oh, okay. So how long was the seminary?
In my tradition, a Master of Divinity is the degree that is generally expected for pastors, and that includes 3 years of coursework and then an internship that's basically formation, like mentoring and on-the-job training that prepares one to serve in a congregation. As time has passed, there are different ways that might unfold. So there are some seminaries that will do an internship concurrent with the classwork. So it's a little loosey-gooseier about the length of time. But for me, it was 3 years of coursework and then a 9-month internship.
So is the seminary affiliated to a particular church, or okay? So every church has a different. Seminary. So
yes, that is true.
Okay.
Though my degree is from a Methodist seminary, a divinity school, and I did, of the 3 years of coursework, I did 2 years there, and then my third year was at a Lutheran seminary to make sure that I had the Lutheran formation that was needed, and the credits transferred to my degree granting place. So.
All right, so I'm going to go back to this academic, the education of this theology. But I have to ask you, so how long have you been a pastor since you get out of seminary? Is it considered as a, I mean, I don't know the steps. I mean, when you graduate from seminary, it doesn't mean that you're a pastor yet, right? Or how does it?
No, so they're a little bit different. Okay. So I've been out. I graduated from seminary 19 years ago. Okay. But it in the Lutheran church, ordination is tied to a call to a particular congregation. And we had household chaos because we were juggling 2 careers. So I had a few years between my graduation and my ordination. So it's been 16 years. It'll be 16 years in August since I was ordained. Okay.
Right. So after you got the call, then you became a pastor. Mm-hmm. Okay. So during this pastorhood, is there a word? Priesthood?
Pastorate is, I think, the word. ATE is the ending. Yeah.
And has there been any doubt or regret?
No, not at all. Not, you mean for the vocational call and the way I lived that out? No, I think it was, I discerned carefully that was the path that I wanted to take. I really enjoy being able to talk about faith with people. And I mean, obviously, like, that is lived out differently now that I'm full-time in a university. But when I was, just before I went to seminary, I actually was deciding between social work or seminary. And so I was working in a church, but I was taking some social work classes while I was there. And my home pastor said, oh, if those are the 2 things you're deciding between, then you should really do this thing called clinical pastoral education. So it is training that is required of Lutheran pastors and a bunch of other denominations as well. And it is essentially on-the-job training in a hospital setting, though sometimes that can happen in other contexts as well, and is the chance to be engaged with a variety of people and be reflective with a supervisor and peers about, when our own stuff gets in the way of really being able to be present with people and offer the kind of support that they're seeking, not the kind of support that we think they're seeking. And to kind of get a clearer sense of our own identity and what that means to walk into a room with a wide variety of people. And so my pastor had said, if you're thinking about social work, you should go do this thing, because even if it's social work, that's where you land, it's still absolutely worthwhile experience. And so I started doing my first unit of CPE, it was spread over 9 months. So I went once a week to the same trauma hospital where I had been life flighted to years before. And we would have class for a day a week, and we had we had units that were our responsibility in like a quieter way. But then because it was a trauma 1 hospital, we also had on-call evenings where we would go and be in the hospital, have a pager, and there was a place to sleep if we got to sleep. And there were lots of times we did not get to sleep. And we're managing more urgent spiritual needs. And it took me all of, I think, 3 weeks to realize that if I was going to do something that felt like social work, that was the thing that I wanted to do. Like that my, the joy I experience in being able to engage with folks about what's most important to them and about how they view God, if God is something they believe in, and what faith looks like in their life in times of crisis or in times that are much more normal. That's just so gratifying for me. So after, those first 3 weeks of my CPE time, it was like, well, I'm clearly going to seminary, so I'm going to start looking at my options.
Wonderful. And you mentioned, and also I know that you have family, right?
Yeah.
So between seminary and then your calling, you have a 3 years gap. So when did you start family? When did you get married?
Yeah, I was married at the same time that I graduated from seminary. So that was in 2006.
Okay.
And then we had a few years. We were in Minnesota for a couple of years. So following my husband's job trajectory, which ended up bringing us to Pittsburgh in 2008. And at that point, we felt like we were in a stable enough place that we could be open to children if they came. And so I actually gave birth to my first child and then was ordained 6 weeks later.
Wow.
Because that's how life is sometimes.
Double celebrations, how about that?
Oh my goodness, there was lots going on, yes. And yeah, I have 2 children now.
Yeah, so it's, I was baptized and still practice occasionally Catholic, right? So I know the difference that, the Catholic priests, they do not get married.
Right.
Right. And probably that's why they're in trouble now. But do you think that having your family at home and then you have family at large in the church give you more challenges?
I mean, I think there are challenges with time, but that's just adulthood, right? I mean, I don't know that that's actually any different. I think it just feels a little bit different. But, I've always thought that I've been a better pastor because I have a family. So, when I do premarital counseling with couples, it's from a different place because I have lived through my own, discernment about marriage.
It's not just theory.
No, it's definitely not theory, even though theory, we're trained for these things as clergy. But, I can make personal comments if they feel appropriate about things that we've found helpful as a family. As parishioners of mine have gone through challenges with parenting or with, all the other aspects of family life. That includes, watching elders age. I'm just like them in some ways. It's just that I have a different kind of formation to be able to offer support.
Yeah.
with full respect for my ecumenical colleagues who may not have families, whether they're Lutheran or Catholic or anything else, I have seen fruitfulness come from that. So it may be that any clergy person or religious leader may be more suited to care or offer support for certain folks because of their experiences, which include family, but not only.
Yeah. So just in case some of you do not know, or in Catholics, the priests do not get married, so they do not have their own family, right? So that's the difference.
And they can only be men.
They can only be men, right?
Too.
Yep. So, but even in the like you say about the differences or the diversity, and about different ways to serve and how you serve, and whether the informations from being a family person can provide that more, I don't know, sometimes better, or different informations to the parishioners, right? Mm-hmm. So I think I can also relate to the even for the priests themselves. For me, growing up in Indonesia and then moving here in the United States, even the homilies are different.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Things that they say during homilies, it's just a speech, it's a full probably 10, 15 minutes of lecture or whatever, right? And that's we call it homily. In Indonesia, it's completely different. While in Indonesia, it's more engaging. It's more, you can relate. They are talking about our problems. Mm-hmm. While over here, most of the time, it's all about theoretical. It's all about abstract. It's all about something that happened 2,000 years ago, right? So it's not related. Why is this country happening? Is this, and how do we address it from our religious perspective? That's what I experienced growing up, but I could not find it here.
That's interesting.
Right? There are demonstrations all over in the country. Nobody talk about it, as if that nothing happened, right? Even though we are disturbed, right?
Yeah.
So what I expected, if the parishioners were disturbed, the clergy have to address it, right? How can they calm us? How to cope? I don't know, right? So it's, I think that even that is, it's different. The same religion or the same, I don't know, right? The same path, but
well, and even among even here in the United States, if you were to take any denomination and look at their clergy, there's going to be a variety of different approaches to things like sermons.
Yes.
And different ways of engaging or not engaging with things like politics and the world around. So I just want to acknowledge that, we could take people from different congregational communities in the same tradition, and they may have very different things that they treasure about, But it is interesting, the question about whether there are tendencies,
right,
and in a particular denominational context. So I think that the question could be levied on any of us, right?
It's true. It's true.
What some of the strengths are and weaknesses, and how that is received by people who attend.
Now, and you mentioned that now, I just realized that, it was true. When I visited my son when he was still living in D.C., only 3-4 blocks away from his apartment, there was a Catholic church, and we attended for Mass. I forgot, Thanksgiving or something. And it's different. It felt like we were in a Baptist church, full of celebration, joy, dancing. It's like, we didn't have this in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Probably, actually, let me rephrase that. Actually, when we moved here, we were shopping for Catholic churches to attend. I think that's the Benedict the Moors, pretty close.
Mm-hmm. Is it? I've never been there.
Yeah, so it's more like a celebration, but but for me, for us, the family, it's too long. Right? Because we actually really, really took their time to know each other, to celebrate the sacrament, right? But I guess we need something in between, right? So
it's hard. It's hard to find a congregation that is like, especially then in a household, right? There are slightly different interests or passions when it comes to the life of faith, and it's complicated enough just with two people who are married, let alone when you have children in the mix as well. And it's a collective discernment about where's a good fit for right now in terms of meeting us where we are.
Yeah.
So
and also about the differences. Even though it's the same, but everybody has different take in life or how they express it back, right? And then and let me probably another segue. It's kind of related to these differences. The Catholic Church just have the new Pope, right? And personally, I'm glad that he was the one, because he's also from a congregation who are into a mission, just like Pope Francis. Francis was a Jesuit, and this one was Augustine. And they were all missions, which means they work in the third world countries, and their homilies are excellent. Going back to what I talked about 5 minutes ago, and they are closer. They are more connected to what we experience daily, so they try to relate, as opposed to abstract, like 2 popes ago, right? It's all just abstract. So from other Christian or branches, I must say that how do you see like this Pope? What is was it discussed? Was it just like whatever, or how is it from personal perspective? Of course, you do not represent anybody. It's just from personal perspective.
So all the things that I say in this don't represent my church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, or Carnegie Mellon University. This is just me. I think that my impression over the years is that many Christian leaders, especially, so clergy or otherwise, in other denominations, are really curious when it comes time to for the Catholic Church to discern about a new pope, because there are just so many Catholics in the world, right? And the Pope has so much influence over how their ministry is like looking at the world and how they're engaging with the people around them. And so I don't think it's that Christians in other denominations look to the Pope just like they're their Pope, like it's not claimed in that kind of same way. But especially like there's so much that our denominations share, and it's Scripture says that we are united in the body of Christ, and that means that we should care about the leadership that is happening by our siblings in other denominations, because that reflects on all of us. If someone has a bad experience at a different kind of Christian denomination, or with a leader who didn't honor their commitments well and was destructive, or like it always reflects back on the rest of us who are also Christian, because it's like how the world is. Just like, that would be the case, I think, for any other faith tradition, that for an individual who's making their way in the world, the witness that they see around them from different traditions is going to impact how they think about that tradition and those people.
Mm-hmm. So talking about the other denominations, for and under this Christian, universal branch, universal church. How many? I don't know how many are they. I mean, I guess how many are they? Or probably not how many. Like they are common in the United States, for example. I know about Lutheran. I heard about Lutheran, like you mentioned, like Methodist. Then there's Baptist, right? And I don't know. What about
there are so many.
Presbyterian,
right?
And probably it's an entire semester of lecture, right?
There are so many branches, and there are branches off of branches, just because that's how humans are. And I think even the traditions that like cross countries, right? Like there are Lutherans and Anglicans, and they're all over the place, right? They're all over the world. But there's so many nuances about what that looks like in a particular culture. I was talking to a student who was from a Catholic church around the world, and they were talking about how different Catholicism was here, and how they couldn't really find a church home that felt like it was a fit. That there was one church that was a little distance away, a little hard to get to, where that was good to go to for like big, important, feast days. But otherwise, nothing really felt like a fit, because it just didn't feel like it looked like at home,
Right.
So I don't know. I wish I had a number for you, but there's just so many little offshoots. It's impossible.
Yeah. But. So I wonder, like going back about the needs for students, I wonder if there's a spreadsheet, what you need and who can offer that, right? I mean, just like a mobile plan, if you pick a cell phone, right? Because or like cable companies, whatever, from Comcast or like what branch, what religion, or what because it's can be confusing, right? I mean. Probably I can ask ChatGPT. I mean,
right. Who knows if it would be reliable and the information that was coming back. At both of the universities where I've worked, I've tried to be very clear with students that if they try to go to worship or prayer or whatever somewhere and feel like it doesn't quite meet them where they are and aren't sure what to do, where to go next, that I would love to have a conversation about that, because I can listen to what the stress point is, whether it's theology or practice or even music, right? And at least if I don't have a suggestion offhand, use my network to say what would be a better fit and try to help get that student connected in a way that will help them feel supported and, explore their faith or commitments a little bit more.
Right. So I think, for listeners out there, if you want to create an app for this,
CMU students would probably be the people to do that, right?
Yeah. You probably should have a grant and when you have an open table, it's like all these religious table groups, students, and CMU, very powerful computer science department. Yeah, should create that. It's like, what do you need in life? And then they come up with suggestions, right? And probably if there's a crowdsourcing from all this, again, one church to another church is different, or or the length of the mass, or even what kind of homily they say. Wow,
that's a lot of data there, though.
Hey.
And I think what might be hard is it doesn't really take into consideration our like actual human complexities, right? Like we could get the data, and if we meet just the right or the wrong person and have just the right or wrong experience.
Right.
What looks like it should be right on our screen. It doesn't necessarily mean it
There's no nuance, right? I guess, we still need human to human connections, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for this an hour discussions. I know more about religion, about what's going on with the next generations of Pittsburghers, and I'm happy for CMU and you to lead this interfaith and also as I said earlier, agree to disagree is okay.
Right.
Right.
Well, it's been such a pleasure to be here. So thanks so much for asking me.